So this past winter, I was in Chicago visiting my oldest son, Chase, who is a permanent resident of Chicago now. And I left early one day, and I caught an early flight from Minneapolis to Chicago, so I landed even by like 9 a.m. And then Chase and his fiancee, Gabby, they were working that day, so I told him not to worry about it, that I'd be more than happy to take the L train from the airport to the stop that's near their apartment. Now, here's the thing about Chicago's Blue Line train. It's a long train. It's like a 45-minute train from beginning to end. It's just one that just keeps going, and it has lots and lots and lots and lots of stops. And here's the other thing about this train, is that this train now, especially early in the morning, like when I arrived, it tends to have a lot of homeless folks on the train. They can buy a ticket that's pretty inexpensive and then stay on the train from the beginning to the end of the back, which is an hour and a half, which is a long time to be warm and enclosed. And like I said, it was winter. So it's a long train, and I get on there, and I'm there obviously with some other commuters or people who have flown in. I get on at the airport, which is the beginning of it, and everybody's doing what they do on trains, and so everybody's kind of scrolling through their phones or they're looking, and they're not making eye contact. You can tell that there's people sleeping in some of the seats, and everybody else is kind of quiet and keeping their head down or their earbuds in. But all of a sudden, we stopped at one stop, and this man gets on, and he's in a suit, and he's got one of those little Bluetooth earpieces, and you can tell that he's like super business guy, and he's having this business conversation things like, well, tell so-and-so that if he doesn't respond to me by this time, blah, 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 blah. So he's like all super business. But then all of a sudden, he looks up, and he makes eye contact with one of the homeless men that were sitting there, and he says, I gotta go, and he hangs up the phone. And then I watched this man, and he reached into his backpack, and he pulled out like a Cliff Bar or something, like a protein bar. And he turned to the homeless man sitting there on the train, and he said, here you go. And he just handed the bar over, and the guy just said, thank you. It was this really simple interaction. But the truth is that this business guy, he looked at that man on the bench, and he saw the man. So here's my question for us today. How do we keep the main thing the main thing? Now, chapter 5 in the book of Mark, it's one of my very favorite chapters. There's a lot going on in this chapter. Jesus is hanging out near the Sea of Galilee, and he ends up meeting this man who's got what the Bible calls an unclean spirit. This man has been wrestling with demons. And this guy, he's been outside of the town. They say he's out by the tombs. He's out by the graves, and he's howling, and he's cutting himself with stones. Can you imagine? And what Jesus ends up doing, Jesus goes and as he passes by this man, the man immediately recognizes him, but not the man, the demons that live in this man. And all of a sudden run to Jesus, and this man with the demons inside of him, he bows down to Jesus. And I want you to notice while you're reading here today that there isn't a second, there's not even a millisecond where Jesus doesn't have full control over this man and his demons. The demons in the man, they know and they recognize Jesus, and they know that there's something that Jesus could do to them if he wanted to, that it even seems as you read it that Jesus has the power to torment these demons that are tormenting this man. It's this really interesting, complicated, beautiful, really interplay. And so these demons, they start negotiating with Jesus. They start saying, you know what, don't just torment us, don't just cast us out, but instead send us into these pigs, send us into this flock of swine that are right over here with us. And what's fascinating to me, what's so interesting, is that as Jesus is looking at this man and the unclean spirits in him, Jesus even shows those demons some mercy. I mean, I got goosebumps thinking about that Jesus even shows that evil some mercy. And so he doesn't torment them. Instead, he allows them to go climb into this flock of swine. And this flock of swine, they end up running down this hill and into the sea. It says that there's 2,000 of them. When I was living in Iowa, I learned from a pig farmer that pigs can't actually swim. So the reality is that they ran straight into the sea, into their own death. But now I want you to imagine just for a second what 2,000 dead pigs in your only water source would be like. I mean, it would totally, completely pollute that water source. But then the pig herders, they come and they notice what has happened to the pigs, and they discover that this man who was once tortured and howling out there amongst the caves, amongst the tombs, is now in their right mind. That this person who had this demon is now fully and completely restored. And it's not the pigs or the poisoned water source that makes them afraid. It's the healed person that makes them afraid. All of their fear ends up directed towards that man, and then also towards the one who healed that man, towards Jesus. And they start to ask Jesus to leave their town. They don't see this as a blessing. They see this as something that they want to push away and that they are afraid of. And Jesus says, okay. And he tells the man, he says, I need you to go tell your family. Go tell your family about what has happened. Go rejoin the people who love you. Now, Jesus leaves there and he makes his way to the other side of the sea, and immediately he is grasped by this crowd. And the crowd is this man named Jairus. Now, Jairus, he's got a prominent position. He's a powerful leader of the synagogue. He is like the guy to know. He's this important person. And so he comes up to Jesus and he begs Jesus. He says, Jesus, please save my daughter. I'm about to die. For this man to be able to say that to Jesus, it means that he was on his last wits. He was on his last options to save his daughter. But here's the thing. The disciples are looking at Jesus and this man Jairus, and they know that Jairus has big pull and big influence. And they want so badly for Jesus to have that pull and that influence. And so they start following him to his house to save his daughter because Jairus is an important guy. I mean, if they're going to get their Jesus movement going at all, having someone like Jairus on your team, that seems like a really, really good thing. And then all of a sudden they're walking up to Jairus' house, and Jesus stops this march towards Jairus' house, and he looks around the crowd, this whole crowd of people, and he says a weird thing. He says, "Who touched my clothes?" And after a while, and with great trembling, a woman comes forward, and she bows down at Jesus' feet. You see, this woman, she's got what they call a flow of blood. She's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. And in this culture and in this society, that means that she is all alone. She has been seen by physician after physician. She's not been healed. She's spent all of her money. She's spent 12 years in isolation. 12 years as unclean and on the outside, kind of like our Gerasene demoniac that got healed there as well. She's not welcome to be with other people because of this flow of blood. But when she sees Jesus, she sees like this chance, this little minute chance to go and be healed. And so she wiggles her way through the crowd, I'm sure hiding so she couldn't be seen. And she just thinks there's just a little tiny bit of hope in this man. So she just touches his cloak and then she's healed. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm not paying attention to the world around me. I tend to want to follow people who can take me somewhere. I tend to want to be like the disciples and follow Jairus and do this cool thing so that I can be recognized and seen. And sometimes I think we don't notice the people that are hurting just right around us. Sometimes we're not like the businessman who took the time to hang up his phone and grab a bar out of his bag and give it to the guy on the subway. But you see, this is what Jesus does. Jesus does this. How often do we as people get distracted from the main thing? We get distracted from what's right there in front of us because we're pursuing something else. How often do we not stop and do what we know that God is calling us to do because we've just sort of made ourselves too busy to notice? And here's the thing, when Jesus is talking to the hemorrhaging woman and caring for her and telling her, daughter, your faith has made you well, that's when the noise comes from Jairus' house. They say, don't bother to come, Jesus. Don't bother to come at all. Your daughter, Jairus' daughter, is dead. You know, you see this chapter, it's beautiful, and it's full of so much juxtaposition. You said the demons who bow to Jesus and the swineherders who want to push him out of the town. Jairus, who's this big, important leader, and then the outcast, hemorrhaging woman who just takes a chance on touching the cloak. You see, here's the thing. Jesus takes the time to stop Takes the time to stop, to see the hurting, the outsider, and the oppressed. Jesus takes the time to stop, to see what you're going through too. And Jesus, you know what he does? He heals all three. He heals the man with the demons. He heals the woman with the flow of blood. And at the end of the chapter, he even goes to Jairus' house and he says out loud, he says, Talitha cum, which means little girl, get up. The truth is that Jesus has got us in and through everything. So here's my question for you today. What demons do you find yourselves wrestling with? And what does it mean for you when you hear that Jesus isn't even fazed by them? That Jesus knows those demons, but those demons, they also know Jesus. And then my second question is, what does it mean when you think of Jesus as taking the time to stop? Taking the time to stop and to care for those people in his midst. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.